Netflix has been releasing less movies at a slower rate, but my guess is that they're starting to focus more on quality as opposed to quantity. They have no choice but to feel the heat from competing with Amazon, Disney, Hulu, and so many other streaming programs, so I imagine they need to focus more on quality control rather than oversaturating their platform. With that being said, they're trying their ever-living darndest to convince the Academy that their original content can compete with the big boys, and a couple of their most recently released movies are strong evidence of that. Those two movies being Martin Scorsese's The Irishman and Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story. Both films are quite wonderful and are among the year's best, so I'm eager to share my thoughts on why this is the case. We'll start with a Scorsese picture. Now, the last time that we saw Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci in a movie together, let alone one directed by Martin Scorsese, was back in 1995 when they did Casino. And we've never seen Al Pacino work with Scorsese, so it's quite historic that all four of these highly respected men have collaborated on an epic mob film such as The Irishman. On top of that, the screenplay was provided by Oscar winner Steven Zaillian, and Netflix was gracious enough to fund this project since it required extensive production design and meticulous de-aging effects. But even though the ambition and potential was there, how's the end result? What I will say is that it ran into the same basic problems I had with Goodfellas. The story structure lent itself to me being riveted, but not always emotionally connected to what was taking place on screen. It's more of a personal thing than what Martin Scorsese and his crew actually accomplished technically, for their work is practically flawless. Maybe I'm just slowly beginning to realize that sprawling crime sagas like this are undeniably enjoyable, but aren't really best of film of the year material for me. That being said, The Irishman hit home with me since its methodical and self-reflective writing echoes an introspective tone in Scorsese's filmmaking. Whereas Goodfellas touched on the thrill of the mob, The Irishman shows the ramifications of that kind of lifestyle. And everyone seemed to have been on board with what Scorsese was trying to accomplish there. For the actors, creative team, and production crew, made something that is a passage of time and theme, and how the plot moved forward. I usually harp on biopics that literally drag its audience through a story, but not only do the nuances in performance and the seamless de-aging CGI make for convincing character-based storytelling, the journey from the 50s to the early 2000s makes a point of ruminating on the past. If the characters' outcomes are inevitable in ways that are typical with these sorts of movies, then it's a sense of mortality that makes all the experience more human. It's less about superficially covering history and obtaining Oscar-bait performances than it is about placing Scorsese's elderly anxieties onto a soulful, compelling cinematic canvas. Not everything works or feels like it even fits, but then again, if the fat was trimmed from the story, we wouldn't get a scene of characters arguing over how to store fish in a car. Rest assured, if you're hoping for a Scorsese mob film that honors the legacy of what came before, I'm pretty sure you won't be disappointed. But now let's talk about Marriage Story, which is so good that it'll end up on my top 10 list for this year. I've always had a respect for Noah Baumbach, but never before had his solo screenplays, or the ones he wrote with girlfriend Greta Gerwig, touch me quite like how his Wes Anderson collaborations did, but that has now changed. When one thinks of a love story, usually it's told with the idea that a couple is falling in love, but how often do we get those that detail a divorce? It's not exactly box office gold to put the audience through the ringer, such as going through the ordeal of watching two people suffer through the terrible, messy, and grueling legal process of divorce. After all, it's a complicated and expensive thing that can cause people to develop animosity that they probably never wanted between each other. Clearly it was on Noah Baumbach's mind to turn his own divorce experiences into something therapeutic, and I think he succeeded. Marriage Story is a very tough movie to sit through because of that, but for my money, it's absolutely worth it, and is easily one of 2019's best movies. Both Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson were given the complete freedom to unleash whatever emotions they had at their disposal, and as a result, their individual performances stand out as the best work I've possibly seen from either of them. Considering how many great performances these two talented people have given, that's really saying something. You have to really believe that both of their characters are flawed people that have wronged each other in various ways, and they do enough to make that convincing, while also garnering enough genuine sympathy to make the story a relatable tragedy. If I was to address any flaws, it'd perhaps be that the scales are a bit weighed in Adam Driver's favor in terms of overall screen time. It made sense to me since a man's perspective would naturally be easier for Noah Baumbach to wax poetic about. Even so, I feel that more time with Johansson would have been helpful. Still, him and Johansson have just enough time to give their characters the depth they need, and then the visuals, dialogue, editing, and supporting performances do the rest. Truly, for the first time, one of Noah Baumbach's solo screenplays related to me personally. The insights he tends to provide on New Yorkers, pretentious individuals, and flawed intellectuals usually intrigued me, but they never fully resonated with my own insights on life. But Marriage Story takes aim at familial issues that anyone can find commonality with, even when their life is perfectly functional. There have been many movies about divorce, and there will continue to be more, but I deeply appreciate the hopefulness of this film, and especially its ending, despite the misery that pervades its runtime. It's both a distinguishing attribute as art, and a graceful cathartic touch for audiences and those who participated in the production. Even when love may seem to be lost, it may not be.